Dr. Evil, Dr. Frankenstein, Dr. Nick. These are just a few of the world's worst doctors, but luckily for us, none of these guys are real.
But the ones on our list today very much are, unfortunately.
Welcome back to Most Amazing Top 10. I'm your host today, Olivia Kozlowski.
And I'm Taylor McWatters, and here are the top 10 most evil doctors in history.
This one's not for the faint of heart. You've been warned. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have H.H. Holmes. This one is like the least fun double whammy ever, as this covers an evil doctor as well as America's first serial killer. Great, awesome combo. H.H. Holmes was a real piece of work, and it is said that his fascination with medicine started at a young age as he used to perform fictional surgeries on his stuffed animals. I just played with rocks, but alright. While it has never been confirmed, it is highly believed that his first victim may have been his childhood friend. H.H. Holmes went on to go to medical school, and shortly after finishing he began killing people in order to steal their property. He then built himself a huge, horrifying home that he had built to include things like secret passages and trapdoors, soundproof rooms, doors that locked from the outside with gas jets on the inside, and he even had a kiln to cremate the bodies. I think it's safe to say he was absolutely terrifying and just the worst guy. Not only would he get close to women to take control of their finances and then kill them, but he would also require his employees to take out life insurance policies that named him as the beneficiary. Some of the bodies he even ended up selling to medical schools. Eventually he was found out, caught, and sentenced to death. It isn't exactly known how many victims he had, but it's thought to be somewhere over 200.
Number 9. Thomas Cream. This next one hits close to home for us in Canada. Thomas Cream originally graduated from McGill in 1876, and after that he traveled to London, England, not London, Ontario, that's important. This was during the time of the Industrial Revolution, so the demand for doctors was quite high. Thomas was there for business and apparently pleasure as well. He enjoyed London's nightlife. He would dance and drink and hook up with strangers, just all the things you want your medical doctor doing hours before a shift. Neat. But on November 15th, 1892, there were thousands gathered outside of the Newgate prison walls, eagerly awaiting the execution of one Dr. Thomas Cream. Well, now he's referred to as the Lambeth Poisoner. Cool nickname, not really, it's terrifying. If you had the misfortune of seeing this doctor, odds are he would just have tried to poison you just because he likes it. He actually did get caught once. He was convicted of poisoning a woman. He was given a life sentence in prison, but it's all about who you know, right? His brother bribed the governor of Illinois, so he poisoned 5 more people in London before eventually getting arrested again, and then finally executed for a large crowd.
In our number 8 spot today we have Harold Shipman. Harold became a general practitioner in Lancashire, England after graduating from medical school, but in 1975 he ended up going into rehabilitation for a substance issue and for the writing of fraudulent prescriptions of the specific drug. In 1977 he ended up moving and starting a general practice that was doing quite well, but then some astute member of the community realized that Harold's patients were dying at quite high rates. Eventually the case was passed on to the police, and it was at first believed that Harold should be cleared of all suspicion, until the death of an 81-year-old under mysterious circumstances. Her family demanded an investigation because they noticed that her insurance beneficiary had been changed to Harold, which reeked of forgery, as well as the fact that she had died shortly after a home visit from him, despite her being completely fine before his arrival. They ended up exhuming the body and found that she had actually passed away from a morphine overdose, and the timing of that overlapped with the time Harold had been in the home. After further investigation, it was also realized that Harold also encouraged all of the families of those who passed to cremate the bodies, as well as he jumped through a ton of hoops to assure them that the cause of death he wrote down was the true and real cause. Anyway, to make a long story short, he was the worst, and thankfully he was finally caught. He was tried and convicted of 15 counts of his crimes, but after his conviction, an audit estimated his number of victims to be around 236.
Number 7. Michael Swango. When he was just a child, Michael Swango did not collect rocks, he didn't spin Beyblades with the boys, rather he had scrapbooks filled with horrible car accidents, or any crime scene that's awful to look at. Young Michael Swango had the specs in his closet just ready to go. As if there weren't any red flags there already, when Michael got to college, he decided to write his chemistry thesis on Georgy Markov. More specifically, he studied his horrific death caused by You guessed it, poison. He was fascinated after that point. His newfound obsession was poisons and how they silently took lives. Now, during his third year at school, 5 patients that had the misfortune of seeing him just happened to die afterwards. His classmates had a nickname for him. They called him 00 in reference to James Bond, License to Kill. That's a fun nickname. After an internship, people of course were starting to die off, but one individual survived, and she remembered that Swango had injected her with something just a minute before she started to experience seizures. Now, he still got away with it somehow. Then later on, he went to another hospital in Ohio in 1984, handed out donuts that made his staff sick, and then when they required treatment, he would then poison them. He got caught, was sentenced to 5 years, but was released after 2. He changed his name, moved to Virginia, got a job as a career counselor, and then poisoned those co-workers too. He got caught after doing this like 3 more times, and now he's serving 3 life sentences at ADX Supermax Federal Prison. This is actually insane. If I told you everything that he got away with, this video would be like 24 minutes long.
In our number 6 spot today, we have Arnfinn Nesset. Arnfinn wasn't exactly yet a doctor, but he was studying to be one, so we'll let it slide for today. At the time of his crimes, he was actually a nurse, and he ended up being charged for taking the lives of 22 different people. It is said that he committed these horrific crimes by injecting patients with a certain muscle-relaxing drug. This worked particularly well because of the fact that this is a drug which over time becomes very hard to trace in the body. This not only worked to conceal the fact that he was committing these crimes for quite some time, but once people did catch on, it became very hard to prove his guilt. The investigations into his crimes took 2 years, and his trial ended up lasting 5 months. He was sentenced to only 21 years in prison because in Norwegian law, this is the maximum someone can be given, even if they're being sentenced for the killing of 22 people. Apparently, he was released from prison in 2004, and he then changed his name, and last I could find, he was living somewhere in Norway. How terrifying.
Number 5, Jayant Toppan. It's the 1800s, and Jayant Toppan, aka Jolly Jane, is confessing to 31 murders. With that nickname and that many victims, I already know you're going to be sick to your stomach. Jolly Jayant Toppan was a nurse working in Massachusetts. She would take care of the elderly, but instead of TLC, Jane would give them morphine and atropine, and then while they were slowly fading away, Jane would do the absolute creepiest thing that I've ever heard in my entire life. She would poison these old folks and then lie in their bed with them as they were passing away. I got goosebumps reading this whole thing. Okay, she managed to cuddle away the souls of 31 patients before eventually getting caught. This one did get caught. She's not like out there still, thankfully. She spent the remainder of her days laying alone, thankfully, in an asylum.
In our number 4 spot today, we have John Bodkin Adams. John was kind of similar to old Harold Boy we already talked about in the fact that he liked to not only kill his patients, but also commit fraud by making sure there was money or other valuables being left for him in their wills. Like, how do these people not realize how obvious that is? I like my doctor, but not enough to gift him my house after I die. It is said that from 1946 to 1956, John had around 160 patients that died suspiciously, and that out of those 160, 132 of them left valuables for him. Of course, the wills were later found out to be fraudulent, because, yep. Want to know something wild though? John was acquitted. How? I'm not really sure, but his trial established the doctrine of double effect, which is where a doctor giving treatment with the aim of relieving pain may lawfully, as an unintentional result, shorten life. How insane is that? Anyway, that makes me upset.
Number 3, Jayant Patel. After training in India, Jayant became a surgeon in 1984. He began his career in Buffalo, New York. Great place to start. But it didn't take long for him to be fined. He was placed on probation for 3 years because he wouldn't check up on his patients before operating on them, which is insane. So later on, he was able to return, but his new coworkers witnessed him operating on their patients. The guy wouldn't even look at his own medical roster. He would just go to them and just start poking around for no reason. And a lot of the time, it would lead to their patient's death or serious injury. In 1998, he was prohibited from operating on the liver or pancreas, and when it came to any other surgery, he had to get a second opinion to go forward. This restriction was statewide come 2000 because 3 out of 4 cases ended up biting the bullet later on. He kept getting hired though still over and over, hiding his past of course, but eventually come 2013, Patel pleaded guilty to 4 charges of fraud. He served 2 years in prison only. That's a nice fact to end on.
In our number 2 spot today we have Karl Clauberg. I honestly wish I didn't even have to say this guy's name because he certainly isn't worth a spot in any of our brains, but unfortunately part of us getting better is knowing the horrors of our past. This evil person was a German medical doctor during World War II, and he was one of many terrible people who conducted experiments on those in concentration camps. After receiving the rank of chief doctor and studying gynecology, he ended up becoming a professor in the field. In 1933 he joined the bad team, which unfortunately is not a word I can say on YouTube, so not to make light of it, but just so we're all on the same page, in 1933 he became a Yahtzee, and then in 1942 he approached another piece of work named Heinrich Himmler and suggested that they conduct some experiments of mass sterilization on women. Yep, and they did it! They assigned him to block number 10 in the camp, and since this evil person wanted to find the cheapest and easiest way to carry out this horrible mission, it was usually acid that was injected into a woman's uterus. Sometimes the patients would be killed just so that they could perform autopsies. It is estimated that around 300 women were unfortunately subjected to these specific experiments, but in even worse news, that doesn't even scratch the surface of the terrible things that were done to people during this time.
And number 1, Linda Hazzard. Her last name really tried to warn us. She has since been dubbed the starvation doctor because back in the day, the late 1800s of course, if you somehow ended up in the office of Hazzard, it doesn't really matter what you're suffering with. Linda's advice, her medical advice to pretty much for everything was just too fast. Yeah, broken collarbone you say, skip lunch. More than 40 of her patients died due to, starvation, and she had her own sanitarium in Washington appropriately named Starvation Heights. Sounds like a great place to go and heal. You would think after 16 deaths caused by starvation at Starvation Heights, people would start asking questions. Wow, weird. Eventually, Major Chip Hazzard was caught, convicted, served 2 years in prison, and then 26 years later in 1938, she herself died of starvation. You played yourself.
Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thank you so much for checking it out. I've been one of your hosts today, Olivia Kozlowski.
And I'm Taylor McWaters, and we'll see you next time on Most Amazing Top 10.
Bye.
Bye.